was, you know.
Form is determined by content.
There you go. Ooh, that's a strong statement.
Yeah.
I was going to say, just add though, that I do remember very specifically, very early on, when we were really just starting to play, that
You're talking about in 1968.
in order to learn
Yes.
to improvise and play solos, we, down in the Singleton's basement, we played Purple Haze for an hour. So we said, okay, we were going to play Purple Haze for an hour, and we did.
We sustained interest for ourselves.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, I don't think it would interest anybody else, but so that was very much part of the learning process. Group improvisation was very much part of our process, and it still is as Outer Park, I'm happy to say.
Yeah. Well, so this particular cut, the things that I like about it, still, you know, and when I listen to it, I still hear some new things. One is that incredible energy that James, you brought with, and Jason, that comes in those first few notes. It's just, there's just energy throughout the whole thing. It's wonderful. I love that we were able to, as a group, really work together as a group, listening to each other and listening for dynamics and texture changes, and really get an example of that, because that was a valuable thing for us. I was happy with all of the playing that we did, and when you're playing a Zappa song, there's a couple of things you always worry about. One is if you're doing one of his more composed pieces, getting it right, because you can imagine Frank blistering criticism if you blow things. The other thing is, a guitarist, I mean, Zappa is was renowned as a guitarist as well, and I had made the choice when we were doing this: whatever you do, don't try to play like Zappa played. Just avoid that. And I tapped into a lot of my other touchstones. I mean, sort of the Allman Brothers and Jerry Garcia, some of the other stuff that we used to play. But I just don't try to do any Zappa-esque stuff. Just forget about it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was nice to do that. And I was like you. I listened to Zappa as a teenager, and I continued to have respect for him. And then when I got really involved in electronic music and music technology in the 80s, and that was a time when he was doing a lot in that. So I sort of touched base with him again. And that was a time when he started to get a small amount of recognition as a composer, as opposed to Frank Zappa of the Mothers of Invention and the sort of satirical,
funny rock star
he was. And that's when an album of his compositions conducted by Pierre Boulez came out, and he sort of got on the map.
Yeah.
And then much later, I actually used him. There was some electronic music on the program for French baccalaureate, and so I used something from that Boulez Zappa album as a contrast piece, and that caused me to go through his vast discography. And I even gave those poor little French high school students an essay question to discuss the diversity of his vast discography. Plus, he made films. He did 200 Motels. He was very in the 90s, or shortly before he died, he was extremely involved in the anti-censorship campaign. He testified before Congress.
He did.
During the labeling thing,
labeling the albums.
Explicit lyrics, mostly on rap records, and so on. And then also I think he has 4 children, and most of them are professional musicians.
A couple more things to think about before we wrap up here is have any of us ever played any more Zappa tunes? Because it's a pretty difficult, it's a vast but pretty difficult catalog. I know that I'm pretty sure I played only one other one. 20 Small Cigars is a song that I did with a band called East River Consort in Boston in the late 70s and early 80s, and I can't recall any others. James, I think you'd said you might have.
Yeah. We played Trouble Every Day on Frenchman Street in New Orleans. It's kind of a rock and protest song.
Yeah.
Very conventional, which is, I don't know, Zappa certainly identifies himself. And then the other one was Any Way the Wind Blows, which really just sounds like a straight up pop song.
That was almost one of his doo-wop.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know, Charles, have you gigged any of his stuff before?
Only King Kong. And as a matter of fact, this is going to get real nerdy for you, but the first time that Jason Marsalis ever came to my school to play with my students, we took a tone row from a Schoenberg string quartet and we improvised on that. And then that blended into King Kong. I knew we were going to try and do King Kong for 1968.
Okay, so
we were it was sort of a test run. But that was also a time when,
I find it's very nearly impossible to stump Jason Marsalis.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it really puzzles me that he would be familiar with that song, because I think of him as being a different generation.
Yeah.
But you're right about Jason. We threw him a lot of new things in those album sessions, and not only did he attack them with relish and enthusiasm, but he also nailed them too. I remember Charles, I think when we were getting ready to record something like 6 Days on the Road or something, Jason, you ever played any country rock? Nope. Looking forward to it, and he just laid down that great country beat, and he's a master of the fill, right? I mean, he's just really just nailed down. So, yeah. Well, one other thing too, Zappa as a social, as a humorist and as a social commentator. Charles, you said something the other day about like who you wish was, wishing he was still around today, given our current situation.
As we watch things unfold crazier and crazier on the news these days, I find that the two commentators I really wish were still around are Hunter S. Thompson and Zappa.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Hunter S. Thompson would be, I mean, it's hard to imagine what he would have to say. On the other hand, it's kind of easy to imagine because you can take a lot of the stuff that he said 50 years ago and just walk it right forward. Well, then, so the other thing too is, of course, he was a funny guy. He was a wise guy. I think that appealed to us early. And another band, a band that Charles and I had that started out as a summer replacement band for the Cowboys, the one that we had with James, was a band that we called the Muffins. And people for 50 years have given me a hard time about the Muffins. Well, it was a line from Call Any Vegetable from one of those early Zappa albums. We was talking about muffins and pumpkins and so forth. I think that was he was kind of a touchstone of being kind of a wise guy and being intentionally obscure so that the regular people on the street didn't know what was going on. So I think he touched us that way too. So anyway, we've been talking about this album, 1968 Slight Return, which we recorded at Esplanade Studios, Misha Kachishvili at the deck with drummer Jason Marsalis, Chelsea Austin, our fantastic vocalist, and on this cut, Jake Martin on the saxophone. And we've been talking about King Kong by Frank Zappa. Hope you've enjoyed that, and come back and see us some other time. We'll talk about the rest of these tunes too. But check it out, 1968 Slight Return by Outer Park. All right. Thanks, guys. Good to see you.